She gave me ayahuasca, and then it was after that that things went very downhill. And I'm incredibly porous. So that's more what it is I'm like, I have poor boundaries. That's what gave me such a rigid psyche that just shattered, was the inability to be like, oh, there is mystery.
Guys, sorry for the worst camera quality this week. Tanner has the camera and he's in LA right now. So I'm filming with Stephanie Brinkhoff alone. Hi, Steph.
Hi,
Welcome back to Self on the Shelf.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always nice to have you. Again, so sorry about the camera situation, guys, but the audio should be normal. Last time we spoke on the channel was for Patreon, where we talked about, well, you were kind of going through a bit of a feminist awakening at that time. How's that going?
It's about the same.
How's your hatred of men coming along?
It's going. I mean, it's complicated. There's a lot of layers to it, but it's definitely, I'm feeling a little bit less, at least on the surface, less ragey. Or maybe I'm just channeling my rage in different directions right now, so.
And did you just start your TikTok since we last did that video?
Yeah, I started it like a month ago, maybe.
And we also talked last time about how you were unlearning Mormon infantilization. Do you feel like you're coming into yourself more in that sense?
Yeah. I feel like it's been such a slow process, and it's like layer by layer by layer by layer, and I'm like, oh, like I'm doing so well, and then all of a sudden another layer will come off, and I'm like, didn't even know that was there, so it's been good.
I feel like that's just how it is endlessly to the end of time, and then you're dead, and you're like, oh, none of it mattered.
Yeah, so the first time I was on the podcast, we talked about how I tried mushrooms, and when I was still Mormon, and then after I did mushrooms, like a week or two later, or maybe a little bit longer than that, General Conference was on TV, and I was like watching them talk, and I was like, oh, I think I'm in a cult. And so I left Mormonism very quickly after doing mushrooms. So mushrooms were kind of what got me out of the church.
And you had taken mushrooms for depression, right? That's what made you willing to try them as a Mormon?
Yeah.
Because you had tried the normal pharmaceutical
routes. Lots of times. Yeah.
What we brought you here to talk about today, is, well, you've kind of had some negative experiences with mushrooms. And even though you saw what love was in that first trip, you have some issues that you've continued developing your understanding of about how the practitioner went about it, would you say? So we're kind of here to talk about that.
And I just will say, like, talking about my facilitators has been so scary for me.
Really?
Yes, because both of them, so there was two of them that I went to, and they were problematic in different ways, but they're both like very, very intuitive. Like legitimate, like witchy types. And I have this thing where I'm like, I don't need any of their like juju coming at me, And so it's been like scary for me talking about it. And I haven't really opened up about it because I legitimately am like kind of scared of them.
Oh, that's actually not what I expected you to say. I thought you were going to say you were kind of afraid that they would see it and you had a complex feelings about them.
I mean, that too, because they were both like nice people, you know what I mean? And usually when people are, at least in my experience, 90% of the time when they're not doing a good job facilitating psychedelic experiences, it's just because of their ignorance. It's not because they're actually like trying to harm people. It's like they have things that they're really, really good at, but then there's other things that maybe they have blind spots or...
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's like being a meditation teacher as well. It's like, I, as a layman, having just like studied meditation a lot personally, I feel like there's a percentage of people I could sort of like teach meditation to at a low level, but like a true meditation teacher has worked with like everything that could kind of possibly happen in the psyche, which is a lot, and like all the many dysfunctions that the meditation might co-opt. There's like such a vast terrain they need to be able to know how to traverse, and maybe someone's a good psychedelic practitioner to a percentage of people, but that doesn't necessarily translate to everyone. And you do seem like a unique case based on kind of what happened to you.
You know what's so interesting though is the one practitioner that I've opened up about the most, I didn't even say her name. All I said was what happened, and I had probably 7 people reach out to me and be like, oh, was it this person?
Can I just circle back on the thing you said about bad juju? Like,
yes.
Are you actually concerned that they have some kind of witchy power to curse you? Like, kind of expound on that.
Okay.
Because you don't seem...
No, it's not necessarily that. Man, this is a tough thing for me to answer.
Do you still have a question mark in your head around witches?
Yes, I do.
You and the Christians, they're terrified of warlocks and witches.
I feel like I've had enough experiences. Okay, so let me just give some background so I don't sound insane. The first practitioner that I went to, when we did mushrooms together, it was like leading up to that, and then the coming months after, she knew things, which I think I've talked to you about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I was like, there was no way she could have known otherwise, right? And so it was very scary for me to be like, how is she knowing this thing that I never told her, that no one's ever told her, and she's just knowing because she's like a quote unquote witch, you know? Another thing I'll add to this is in 2023, I found a woman, she's a Lakota woman. She's like a Lakota descendant. She lives in Oregon. I'm like obsessed with her. I love her so much. She's phenomenal. She's like a true like medicine woman, like wisdom keeper. You know, it's like this lineage is like being passed down through her. And she taught this year long, and hopefully this isn't too woo for your channel.
No,
okay.
we kind of are right on that line of woo and skeptic, you know?
Yes, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did this year-long container with her where she basically, it was a group of like 10 people, and for once a month for a year, she would take the group through a Lakota tradition, and we would do a Lakota ritual. And it was something with like the elements or something with, you know, drumming or whatever. And those rituals were like, I was like, magic is real.
And they didn't all involve psychedelics?
None of them did.
Okay.
It was literally just like working with the elements, and I don't know what the hell she was doing, but I was like, magic is real. What is happening? It was crazy to me, the amount of things that like, I'm like, this can't be real.
I mean, when you say drumming, I'm like, yeah, you know, you're tapping into something in the brain that is powerful. I feel like if you're, especially with a woman like that who's got like this rich
and like
backbone.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So that kind of freaked me out about this whole like, I don't know, just the idea that like you could maybe get, I don't know if I would go so far as to say someone's gonna like curse you or, you know, or like cast. I feel like if that were true, then like somebody like Donald Trump would no longer be around, because you can guarantee that there are bajillions of witches.
He's kind of impervious to being cursed though. Like me and Tana have talked about this, but he's a manifester and he has an abundance mindset. He doesn't have like the porousness because he's just like, no, this is me and I'm full bore all the time. Never relent. I don't know.
And I'm incredibly porous. So that's more what it is I'm like, I have poor boundaries.
I offered Stephanie a decaffeinated green tea once, and she was like, oh, it was because it was nighttime, and she was like, oh no, that might fuck me up too much before bed.
That's so true. So it's more so that I'm like, if somebody's like putting bad energy at me, like I probably would be like, okay, I'll take that. You know what I mean? Without realizing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so then the last thing I'll say is that the second practitioner I went to, and I guess it's okay that I say this. If you don't want to say this on here, you can cut this out. So as you know, and as I've opened up on my Instagram about, in 2023, I had an abortion. And it was like a month or two after that, I went to this practitioner, this facilitator, I don't know what to call them, this woman. She just is like Reiki or like, I don't know, who knows what the hell she's doing. She's doing some type of like, she'll do like a card reading for you or what. She's like an intuitive that they do their things that they do. And I went to her and this is a true story. I was like laying on her table. She put her hands on my feet and she was like, you had an abortion.
See, that blows my mind.
And I was like,
it doesn't completely surprise me, but it's like, what?
Yes.
What? And you hadn't posted about it? Or...
No.
Yeah, that is wild.
So this is why I'm like slightly afraid to talk about these people, because I'm kind of like, I'm a little bit of a wuss. I'm a little bit of like porous. I'm not like Donald Trump.
You're not an abundance manifester.
I'm not. I'm kind of like, please don't hurt me.
If anything, you're kind of manifesting like
the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, like with your food stuff, sometimes it's like you're like predicting that something might fuck you up.
Yes.
So I understand the concern.
I have issues, okay?
It's good to know yourself. And I think don't invite the ire of a witch if you don't absolutely have to. But I think it's good that you've been sharing your experiences.
I do too. And I just feel like I had to get that out there just to like get it off my chest. Yeah, but I think I'll be fine. You know, and you know what? My experiences that I had with these people giving me the psychedelics is why I'm so fucked up today.
Well, yeah. Then let's get into that a little bit. You took mushrooms that first time. You deconstructed Mormonism because of that experience. You saw what love truly was, but you also describe it as like PTSD inducing. I mean, how do you think of it in terms of like, do you wish it hadn't happened like that? Or like, what do you wish would have been different?
I've only been talking about this for maybe the last couple weeks, and I'm noticing that like, if I talk about like, hey, this is how psychedelics can be problematic, you get like this weird corner of the internet that's like, they're either like, yeah, I hate psychedelics too. And like, they're the worst. And they think that you're like in that club. Or you get people who are very sort of like dogmatic about plant medicine. And they're like, you need to give them another try. And like, just because it was bad for you doesn't mean it's bad for everyone, you know?
Honestly, I think historically I've a little bit leaned in that second camp, in that I have obviously I'm aware that psychedelics aren't for absolutely everyone. There's people that have people with like a schizophrenia tendency, for example. I just read a book about schizophrenia. I didn't realize that like up to 4% of people have like some level of schizophrenia. Like I think it's 1% for true schizophrenia, but if you include schizoaffective disorder, it's 4%. That's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think I generally have been of the mindset that like psychedelics sort of show you what you need to see. It's just a question about like how you're interpreting it. But I wouldn't say that that's a statement like I don't like feel comfortable saying like just in that way now. That's just what was true for me.
Right.
And I can recognize that that's not.
Right.
And the practitioner is everything really. I feel like for me, I just happen to have the set of circumstances and personality or whatever conditions that meant I could sort of be my own practitioner, integrator. Like I had teachers I sort of looked to online and Tana, and like I was doing research, but generally speaking, I was able to do psychedelics, sort of integrate the lessons quite well on my own. It would feel overwhelming at times on the trip, but not in I don't have PTSD from doing them.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like you were resourced enough in yourself already.
Which is crazy because I was like suicidal before psychedelics and I've had existential depression my whole life since I was like 3. But for some, just the right set of conditions existed in me to be able to do that.
Right.
And even then, it's like, I'm sure there are other settings I could have done them in. Like maybe I would be someone where if I would have done them in a more formal setting, that could have been worse for me. Like you don't really know what's going to be best.
Yeah, it's true. And a lot of it, there's so much that can contribute to your experience aside from just like your set and setting in that day, right? Because like the fact that I didn't have, like I was going through a divorce, I just lost all my friends, and I had lost Mormonism at the same time.
Yeah, the fact that you went in not realizing that this was going to make you deconstruct your entire world, that is just so nuts.
And then like after that, it was almost like I went in and I experienced this like ego dissolution, and then I didn't have anything to come back to. And that's been the biggest thing that I've seen, because I've done a ton of research on other people who have had very traumatic experiences, and it's like they all have something that they can hold on to that kind of gets them through, whether it's like one person, a person to ground to that's safe, or like a job they love, or a passion that they love, or even just like something like connecting to their body or nature. And it was like, I didn't have any of that.
Yeah, I do think having Tana was huge, because me and Tana were already so like philosophically like we knew each other well. We had like deep philosophical conversations all the time. He was exactly the type of friend that I could be on a trip with and be like, free will is an illusion. And he'd be like, yeah, we could like meet each other in any kind of space like that. And I was usually almost tripping with him. But you were doing it with what, like strangers?
Well, and I just mean like after the fact, like I think if I had a really difficult trip and then had a safe place to return to, I think I would have been okay.
Yeah, and it is true that even just having one person in your life can kind of provide that. I certainly didn't have like a healthy developed sense of self at that time necessarily, but more so than you probably had, coming from a lifelong woman. Yeah.
And maybe you had more external anchors that felt like things you could hold on to.
Yeah, like my internal world was just like, I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah, just like wild existential depression. The lack of any sort of foundation, is that what you think is like the primary reason it was so traumatic?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things. So it was just like the perfect storm of things. First was the fact that the facilitators were not great. So like the first trip that I did that was 1 gram, that one didn't give me PTSD.
Okay.
It was just, it was actually fine because it was 1 gram. And it was like afterwards, it was crazy to be like, oh, like the church isn't true and like this is wild, but that's not the same as PTSD.
Okay, so that didn't feel traumatic.
Yeah,
outside of the fact that it is traumatic.
Yeah, it's true. It was like, oh my, like this is wild, and it was like difficult, but it wasn't PTSD in the sense that I was like having flashbacks, or it was like it felt like my body was stuck in something that I couldn't get it out of, type of a thing. So then from there, is kind of when things started to go really downhill, because, I was deconstructing Mormonism, and then I was leaving my marriage, and I was losing all my friends, and I was really having a hard time. And I should have been going to therapy, but it was like, I didn't know. I was so naive. You know, when you're Mormon, you're just like, God will fix all your problems,
Yeah, and therapy is just, it's a hard one, because it really isn't just like the easy thing that people act like it is. Like when I was pre-psychedelics, or maybe had like started doing them, I think I hadn't done them at this point, but when I was like deep in like nihilism, existential depression, I went to a therapist and I did a session, and then I was just like, that man can't help me.
Yeah.
Like I just didn't feel like a therapist could help me. And I think there was something like intuitively true about that. Like I think I was sensing something true in that. Like for whatever reason, I just think I was someone that needed to go on the journey myself, because I don't know, it's probably like the only child in me, or I don't know, I just feel like my inner world, it would just take so long to catch someone up, or to like feel like they could even get it.
Like meet you where you're at.
Yeah, which I know isn't like a...
No, I can relate.
Yeah, like a good therapist can obviously meet you in places. And so I'm not saying I'm like, was too good for therapy by any means, but just at that time, I just don't think I had, and I guess with that therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never really been like in moments of crisis that helped by therapists. Even when they've given me like little nuggets, it's like, it's always felt like a very personal journey I've had to go on.
Yeah. I think it totally depends on the type of therapy and the therapist too. Because the people that have helped me the most, the two of them, neither of them are therapists. They're like, one was an integration coach who wasn't a licensed therapist. And the other was, she does process work, which is like a branch off of Jungian psychology, also not a therapist. And so it's like, for me, it was all about finding the right person, because most of the time I'm like, I don't know if like, what have you been through?
Yeah.
Like, did you learn this from a book? Like, tell me about your own trauma.
Yeah. You know? Like for me, Eckhart Tolle was better than any, like Eckhart Tolle was the person who kind of woke me up and helped me build some kind of stable foundation.
Yeah.
And he's not a therapist. And he doesn't even talk about his own trauma really in his book. But it's just, we each kind of have different things.
For sure.
That our brains
and I think at that time, what I needed was somebody who knew what, like, hey, listen, you're going through a really difficult thing right now. You should find some stability. You should find some grounding. You should find some things that make you feel like a normal human being. Instead, I was like talking to this woman that gave me mushrooms the first time, and she was like, well, let's try this other medicine. Well, let's try this.
Datura.
Let's try this other one. Yeah. So first it was combo. She gave me combo. Have you heard of this?
No, what's that?
It's the one that it's like they burn it into your skin, and you're supposed to only do like 1 or 2 dots of it, but she did 8.
What?
Which is insane. Yeah. Does this sound wild?
What is this? It's a psychedelic?
It comes from a frog.
Oh.
Yeah, and they burn off like a tiny top layer of your skin. I can show you on my leg. Look, I'll show you. You can't see on camera, but so she gave me 8 dots, which was like, apparently I didn't know at the time, but that's like so much.
Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, it was a lot. And
so it sounds like inappropriate dosage is a big...
Absolutely.
And now knowing you, I mean, I guess I didn't know you before, but I imagine it didn't just begin with psychedelics, that you are just sensitive to things.
I think I was very dissociated. You know, it's like I almost had no body awareness because of Mormonism and like all that, but like I am highly sensitive now. Now I know.
Yeah.
And then like a couple months goes by and she's like, let's try Bufo, which I'm like, it's insane.
What are these niche ass psychedelics she's got you on?
Oh,
whatever
Bufo?
happened to just microdosing and going on a hike?
Oh,
like,
5-MeO DMT is like that one. And luckily she only gave me a small amount. But it could have been so much worse. Like that is one that is very high risk as far as like psychedelics go. Like you really have to know what you're doing.
God,
I know.
It just blows my mind, because I'm like, now that I'm learning more about this, I actually didn't know all this about like all the niche psychedelics that you
there's
were
so
on.
many, yeah.
But that's making so much more sense.
Yeah. Like what happened to me?
Yeah, because I'm talking about how like, oh, I did this like self-led journey, but it's like, but also generally speaking, I was at my own house with my best friend doing like, I mean, sometimes I would do like 2.5 grams of mushrooms, but that would be kind of the upper limit. I think one time I did like 3 or 3.5, but for the most part, I was doing like relatively small doses of mushrooms and LSD. Occasionally Molly, but that was kind of came later. Completely different ball game. And also it's like, you're kind of getting used to doing those. Like if you just kind of stick with mushrooms, for example, you're kind of getting used to that headspace, but you're just trying these random ones all over the place.
Yes, and I was going through incredibly traumatic, destabilizing things in my personal life. You know, I was already experiencing this like ontological shock from leaving Mormonism.
That's another thing. I was technically speaking in like a stable marriage, which also, I mean, it's like its days were kind of numbered.
Yeah.
It was fated to end eventually, but like it felt good enough at the time.
Yeah, like stable enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like I basically was like, oh, nothing that I thought was real. Why don't we go into psychedelics?
Frog poison. Yeah, that will fix me.
This will help, And so then like a couple months later, she's like, I can't, like she was like busy, or I don't know, she couldn't keep working with me or whatever. And so she's like, I'm going to refer you to somebody else. And so I went to somebody else.
And it's a frog.
And it was a frog. Yes. So she could no longer see me. She was like too busy, whatever. I was still having a really hard time. And they were like, people are just like, psychedelics are good for your mental health. And so I'm just like, I got to keep doing these. Like, I need to help my mental health, And so she referred me to somebody who was like, she was the one who mixed mushrooms and ayahuasca together. And this is a nuanced conversation, because when I got there, people always ask me this. And so I'm going to like clarify this for the internet. When I got to her house, she was like, I have mushrooms. We can also give you ayahuasca if you want. And I was like, I don't know. Like, once again, of course, knowing nothing. And I was just like, let's just see how I feel. So I take the mushrooms. And then partway into the journey, she asked me if I wanted the ayahuasca.
Do you know how much mushrooms you were on at this point?
So she gave me 2.5 grams.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
On its own for you, I feel like that's a lot.
And I actually threw up part of it, which I'm like so glad that I did, because the trip itself obviously was enough to like break my brain. But she asked me if I wanted the ayahuasca, and I said yes. And people are always like, every other facilitator that I've talked to is like, first of all, you never mix medicines. Second of all, you can't ask for your client for consent when they're on drugs.
Yeah, that does seem like a little bit of an ethical gray area.
Like, hey, do you want me to add this thing? And I'm already like floating off into space. She gave me ayahuasca, and then it was after that things went very downhill.
On the trip?
The trip was like, it wasn't until after. Like, the trip was okay. I was just like very... I would say I was like out of it. I was pretty out of it. But then afterwards, I couldn't come back. I couldn't get back in my body. I couldn't come back to this, like, it felt like I couldn't reconstellate. Like, pieces of me my consciousness were just like gone.
So by this point, how many trips would you say you had had?
So that was my fourth then.
Okay.
And this was over a span February to August.
And had you been feeling like the previous ones were helping? I mean, that first one was so significant. I assume
the first one, it's tricky with psychedelics, because it's like they can help give you insights, which can be very helpful. But it's like they're only one piece of a much larger puzzle for what it means to actually heal and be well. So you can't just like be repeatedly getting awareness without knowing how to integrate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of how it was.
So it maybe felt like you were learning, because, I mean, you did learn a lot really fast from that first trip. But that's not the same as your well-being increasing in any way.
Exactly.
I mean, it sounds like it was just more of a downward.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, at that point, the only narrative I had heard is the very sort of like Western medicine, like, these are good for your neural pathways, and this is going to be the new antidepressant. And so I was just like, why isn't this working? I was just so naive about how they worked, and it's just like, they're not like taking, I mean, for me at least, they have not been like taking an antidepressant at all, like 0%.
No, I find that to be like it's just like a weird, I don't think that's like the best way of talking about their therapeutic benefits. Like, I know that they can like look at the research and be like, X percentage of people experience improvement in treatment-resistant depression, and like, fair enough, that's fine. But it's like, psychedelics didn't fix my depression because like you take psychedelics and then like, oh, it's like, there's so much that goes into it. It's like the actual experience you have on the trip, what you learn, the insights you have, how you integrate them, how you're combining them with like other, because for me, the period of time, I mean, my life has kind of been like this ever since, but especially back then, like the period of time where I was taking psychedelics, my entire life was like figuring out how to live in this world. Like, I didn't have any responsibilities. I like couldn't work at that time. Like, I was just devoting my entire life to healing. But it's funny because I wouldn't have described it as like healing at the time. I don't know what I would have even described it as at the time, because I didn't even go into my psychedelic journey knowing that healing was necessarily the goal. It was just this thing I was drawn to because I was just like, I need insight. I need, for whatever reason, I just continued to be drawn to the experience. Yeah. I can't remember why I was even saying that.
But I liked it. I enjoyed it.
So the mushroom ayahuasca combo.
Yeah.
That's when you couldn't come back.
Yeah, I just remember like sitting on the grass, and this was like in the week or two after, like it was for a couple weeks, and just like feeling the ground and being like, is this the ground? And it had been like 2 weeks, and I was just like, it felt like I was watching myself. It felt like I was like in a dream. And I texted the woman and I was like, what happened to me? And literally all she said was, you're stuck in the astral plane.
Classic.
And I was like, thank you. I feel better.
How do I get out?
Yeah. Can you help me
What's
come
the password,
back?
please?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's sounding, just based on this single book on schizophrenia that I recently read, which was called The Schizophrenias. It was like an essay collection from this woman, but it's sounding schizophrenia adjacent, like that thing that like you're not really you, nothing's really real. I mean, those are like schizophrenia-like symptoms.
Yeah, or like some type of psychosis.
Yeah. Are these practitioners, like, how trained are they at dealing with, because you don't always know going into psychedelics that you have those possible, or where you are on the spectrum.
For
so
sure.
they need to be prepared for it.
Yeah, and that's why for me, it's like impossible for me to personally to separate, okay, where exactly did the trauma come from? Was it just the psychedelics themselves? Was it the fact that my facilitators were doing a bad job? Or was it Mormonism? Was it my psyche that was already so black and white and rigid and split from my, it was like bringing that into the psychedelic space.
Yeah, because it's certainly not Mormonism. Because like your psyche was Mormonism. Like that's what you were built to be like. Yeah, that is very interesting. Just the notion of bringing like a categorization dissolving, potentially, I don't know how to describe it, like medicine in when your brain is entirely set up to do black and white thinking. Like that just seems...
And I feel like that was a huge piece of it because I was so disconnected from my unconscious material. It was like I didn't know, it was like I got like expanded, or like opened or whatever the medicine was doing. And then all my defense mechanisms, you know what I'm saying? Like that you build up to keep yourself split off from whatever's hiding in your unconscious, or it was just like, it couldn't, it felt like my psyche was too rigid. Like I think of a psyche, you want it to be flexible, you want it to be fluid, you want it to be like, okay, I can shift and I can evolve and I can, life's gonna do sorts of whatever it's gonna do and I'm still here. Whereas a very rigid psyche just like shatters. And then you have all these pieces that you're like, oh, I gotta like put this back together somehow. And I don't know what piece is what, which is like how it felt for me.
I do. I just, I'm not meaning to talk about myself so much. I'm just kind of doing it to provide like the contrast, because I feel like we sort of had, like I would just overwhelmingly describe my psychedelic experiences as positive, even though many of them were very, very hard. And I don't want to like gloss over the very real like struggle that went into that whole journey. But I hadn't grown up in Mormonism. So I'd spent my, 16 years leading up to being Mormon having a degree of like philosophical flexibility, for example, and like the ability to, I don't know, I think I had, it makes sense to me that I would just have a little bit more of that leeway. And I also feel like I'd been dealing with such like insane existential questions, depression, whatever you want to call it, from such a young age anyway, that it was like, there were definitely things I encountered on psychedelics that were very destabilizing, but I was still sort of able to face them. Like there were definitely times when I would have defenses go up and where I'd be resistant to sort of seeing certain things, accepting certain things. But generally speaking, because I was like so hungry to just like see what's true, which I know that psychedelics don't just like universally speaking show people what's true, but like for me, they were very useful. It's like I was able to get through it all with my own resources. Now that we're having this conversation, I'm like, damn, I got so fucking lucky in ways but if you would have been there at the time, like it didn't feel like that. Like it was a lot, but it's just interesting now hearing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see how people like me are probably part of the reason that a lot of people get false ideas about what psychedelics might do for you.
Yeah.
But also I wasn't doing frog poison.
Yeah.
Like random ayahuasca combos.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, you're also up against a different beast.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm like, all of it together is kind of what made the perfect storm for me. And I feel like when people talk about, difficult, like a bad trip or like a traumatic psychedelic experience, it's like there's kind of different categories. Like there's maybe what you're describing where it sounds like it was hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and absolutely like annihilating in many, like certainly like I had like ego death experiences that were white hot terror to be facing them. There were many difficult things that I had to like get through.
You said like you were able to integrate even if it was difficult.
Yeah, like it didn't just immediately make me not want to die anymore, or, you know, make the terror go away. There was so much. But I could wake up the next day. Like, I didn't, what you were describing about being completely disconnected, like, I do think I was disconnected from my body too, from Mormonism, from an entire life of reasons, but not in the sense where I felt like I couldn't, like, quite access myself. Or, like, what you're describing is, especially after the psychedelics have worn off.
Yeah.
Like, that's not necessarily relatable.
Yeah, like it was more of like almost like a psychosis.
Yeah, and I would be, there would definitely be experiences I had on psychedelics that kind of rendered me unable to function, but that was all just sort of part of the journey for me. Like, I just wasn't going to be able to work for like a period of, for example, because I just needed to devote my entire life to that effort to be able to survive it. Yes. Which luckily I had like sort of the resources-ish to do.
Yeah.
Back to you.
It makes sense. No, that makes sense. So then there's like experiences like that. And then like the next level up, I would say, is people who have actual trauma or PTSD from the experience itself. So for example, like something about the psychedelic experience, it's not necessarily just that the experience is difficult or just that they're coming face to face with things that are like terror. It's more so that like something about the experience itself gives them PTSD. So it's like afterwards, they like maybe they'll have flashbacks where it's like they can't do certain things. Like maybe they can't meditate because the second they start to go into an altered state, they get triggered and it will like trigger a panic attack. Or like they can't get high because it's the same. It's like, oh, it starts to trigger that same feeling and they can't lose that control again until they'll have a panic attack. So it's like, it's a traumatic experience, but it's also, they can put it in the past still. Like they can look back on it and be like, oh, that gave me PTSD. Sometimes I have, triggers from this. I'll get flashbacks, but it's like a traumatic memory. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then there was more like my experience where it was almost like the psychedelic experience didn't turn off. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's like my body got stuck in it.
Which again feels so schizophrenia adjacent. Are we diagnosing you? And I'm just kidding. But that like is how this woman in the book that I read sort of, that seems similar. Yeah. And obviously schizophrenia is just like a name we give to like a set of symptoms when they reach a certain point.
Yeah, exactly.
And it sounds like maybe you're just like higher and on the spectrum of many of those symptoms. Yeah,
and people who have experiences like me, who have, it's almost like a psychedelic experience that doesn't shut off. It can manifest in a lot of different ways. Some people are in full-blown psychosis where they lose complete contact with reality, and they're just kind of like, they start to become very, like they can't recognize that they're in a psychosis, which is like the telltale sign that you're actually...
Because I do relate to feeling like not having any grounding in reality from psychedelics, like even after, because so much you've just seen through so many things that we take as just like the way things are, or reality you basically see as like, oh, that's like a socially constructed reality that isn't actually real, and that is like really destabilizing and can leave you like grasping. But I always knew that was sort of happening. Like it was still terrifying because it did often feel like, to use like a cheesy metaphor, but like everyone was in the Matrix and I was just over here like, free will isn't real. Everyone is just a robot. Like my mother is just a robot. Like we're all just preconditioned. And that was like a lot to have to integrate and did take years. But like, I find your story interesting because I think previously my general thoughts when people were like, oh, psychedelics were bad for me, like I had a bad time with them, I think I sort of imagined it as like, well, everyone doesn't want to see certain truths. Like everyone is not prepared for how not concrete reality, a lot of things that we take as concrete reality is. Like everyone isn't really cut out to see through conceptual reality. And I which I now realize that's one type of reason.
Yeah, there's like a whole other...
Like with some people, I think in the past I've had the mindset of like, you just got to get a bit more psychological grit.
Yeah.
But I can also now see, especially with like psychedelics are operating on such a like physical body level when you're under them. So it's like regardless of the psychological grit, it's like if your body has a certain reaction to them and then, you can't just like outthink PTSD is my point.
Yeah, exactly.
In the same, it's just like any type of PTSD.
Yeah, and I think it's common for people who haven't had experiences like this to feel that way, right? And I encountered that with a lot of even like integration coaches where they'd be like, I don't think it was actually from the psychedelics. you know? And I'm just like,
what do you think it was from?
I'm like, isn't this your job?
Yeah.
Like, why can't you admit? And you could feel like, you know how Mormons have a really hard time acknowledging that there's any downsides?
Yeah.
That's exactly how people in the psychedelic space are. They're just like, you can feel their fear around being like, well, psychedelics couldn't have caused this in you. Like, this must be a fault of your own, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's complicated, like everything that led up to it and everything that fed into it. But the experience with the psychedelics itself absolutely gave me PTSD, you know, and it wasn't just because I saw some, you know, truth that I didn't want to see. It was like my body, like you were saying, my nervous system couldn't like put itself back together after that.
Another point I was going to say, sorry, again, I'm bringing this back to me, which I
love when you talk about yourself.
Yeah. I also feel like going into psychedelics, I was already so prepared to just continue thinking that life was just like inherently not worthwhile and was just like complete suffering and there was no hope. Which if you're going in as a Mormon, even if you've got depression, it's not quite like that, you know? Like I think I was already such a nihilist going into psychedelics, whereas for you, it's kind of like psychedelics brought you to that space.
Yes.
Unprepared.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, I don't know, even when psychedelics were horrifying, it wasn't necessarily like it could be worse than, it's complicated. It's hard to know how to talk about. This is a good exercise for me, trying to
it's very
articulate my
nuanced
thoughts on it. But it's like, I didn't have like a lot of hope that life was worth living before. So then these glimpses, I mean, I think honestly, a lot of it for me was like psychedelics were just something interesting compared to my mental life outside of them, which just felt like, what is the fucking point of any of this? That it was like my curiosity is what sort of kept me going, even when it was horrifying. So I was like, well, everything's horrifying no matter what. So I'm like, let's just like see something interesting while I'm here.
I feel like I'm already in the horror.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to like, it's like, I was 23, I think, when I started doing psychedelics. So it was like 10 years ago. Even though I have done them throughout that time, it's like I don't really do them that much now compared to, there was a period of time where I was doing them quite constantly.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd like to get back to you again.
No.
Sorry.
What I was going to say, one thing I should add too, is that none of the experiences that I had when I was on the medicine, the psychedelic itself, I never experienced anything traumatic on
That's
ever.
interesting.
Yeah.
Because I definitely did.
No, I never did. All my experiences were like, oh, there's Jesus.
So
you know?
were never like terrified
Nope,
on them? Oh
never.
my God, there was so much white hot terror.
Yeah.
The kind of terror that is like, again, I've had existential depression since I was 3, but there would be like stuff on psychedelics where it was like such a new level of horror. I can't even explain it, but just like for a while, it was almost like psychedelics were showing me like there is nothing to ground yourself in, which is kind of true. But
yes, and so for me, and I feel like I can relate to what you're saying because mine came afterwards, and this is where I'm like, this is how I know that the psychedelics were like I have PTSD from them because it's like my body got stuck in a thing that I couldn't get it out of because I didn't have any of that terror until like a couple months later. I had my very first panic attack, and then it was like all hell broke loose. And it felt like I was legitimately, like it felt like I was on psychedelics for like months, where it was just like I was stuck in a bad trip. And
even though you hadn't had a bad trip.
Even though I never had a bad trip. Yeah.
Interesting.
It was so intense. And I kept feeling like I was dying. That's the only thing I'm like, I feel like I'm dying. And then people would be like, well, like what's happening? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like I'm dying. And it was almost like my body was literalizing like ego death. Like it got stuck in this pattern of like, oh, here's the part where we die. And then it was like, oh, and here's the part where we die again. And here's the part where we die again. Just like over and over and over again in my waking life. So I'd be like in the shower, and then all of a sudden I'd be like, you know, and I'm just like having some insane, like, you know, obviously tons of panic attacks, but there was this added piece of like this terror, like you're describing, that was like nothing I've ever experienced in my life.
And would it, I mean, you just described the shower, so would it just randomly hit you at moments in your day, as well as being some kind of constant?
Yeah, so when it started happening, this was in November of 2021, it was consistent, like all day long, you know, probably like 5 or 6 panic attacks a week, but then in between that, it was constant, like on the verge of a panic attack. So it was very consistent. And then it slowly started to become less and less and less and less. And maybe like 2 months later, I found the first integration coach that I worked with who was phenomenal and absolutely saved my life and like put me back together in a way. But it's like, it's been 4 years and I still have issues. Like it completely destroyed my nervous system. And I think it's because it wasn't like an experience that ended when the psychedelics ended. It's like I have had the hardest time like getting myself to feel like my normal self again. You know, it feels like it's just like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like I got stuck, my body got stuck in something.
Well, especially because like your normal self kind of was like eradicated by psychedelics too in so many ways. Like what were you supposed to return to?
Exactly, yeah.
When you were literally a Mormon girl through and through, that was like your entire thing. You probably had the way you talked about how you were when you were Mormon, there wasn't anything outside of that really.
No.
Other than just like repression.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So like there's like nothing to go back to. Mm-hmm. What was it that the integration coach, what was it that was so helpful about what
He. So.
Hate when a man helps.
I know. No, I mean, he was really good, phenomenal. So it was a number of things. One was that he had been through it himself. He had a lot of experience with psychedelics and working in the psychedelic space. And I'm not talking like whatever we're doing here in Utah. I'm talking like legitimate hands-on training with like teachers and mentors and experience doing them himself with all different cultures and people, you know. So he had been through the experience of like coming back from a psychedelic trip, but not really coming back. So he'd been through it himself. That was a huge piece of it. And so he could kind of be like, I know where you're at, you know? Where the rest of the people were just like, oh, this is interesting. Like I know that people can have a hard time.
The idea of doing psychedelics and you're like losing it, and then your practitioner's like, what a curious case. I don't know about this. Oh my God.
Exactly.
What?
I'm like, are you supposed to know?
Like, okay, so I'm fundamentally broken. It can never be fixed. Great.
So he kind of knew, like he could be like, this is where you're at. Like, and he's like a Jungian. And so all of his perspective was very much about interacting with your own unconscious. And so he was really good at being like, I just felt like he knew how to like, I don't know, guide me through whatever was coming up for me that I was like, this is the end of the world. I'm going to die. This is like, I was like absolutely in some sort of like mental loop of terror. He was able to be like, okay, like he just knew how to like guide me through it.
I found that interesting because in the schizophrenia book I read, at the end, she talked about how what has kind of ironically, given what schizophrenia is, helped her is kind of getting into certain like mystical, what could be considered new age or like ancient whatever practices. So she talked about how like tarot, which you could so easily see for a schizophrenic person being maybe not a good idea because the veil is so thin or whatever, however you want to describe that. I think a lot of the time, yeah, I mean, leaning in is better than fighting against whatever's going on in your psyche. You just kind of need to have, because she talked about how she had like specific teachers that really helped her do it in a way that was safe. So she wouldn't like fly away.
I totally agree with that. And I feel like in my own process, the Western paradigm of mental health disorders
atrocious.
Was zero help to me. Zero help. It was basically just like if I would have gone to a doctor, they would have been like, you're in psychosis or you have schizophrenia, you need a pill. And so this is why I have loved, like process work. Did I already talk about process? Oh yeah, I said my other therapist is, yeah. So process work is all about like essentially that your body. So like Jungian psychology is a lot about dream work, right? Like it's working with your unconscious through your dreams. And then Arnie Mindell developed process work, which is basically like your body is still dreaming even when it's awake. And you can work with your unconscious material even though you're, right?
That tends to be more like, I mean, I do find dreams interesting. But I feel like once I discovered like Jungian psychology, Carl Jung, it was more like the waking. I don't know. I guess in my mind, I don't see him especially as like a dream guy, even though I know that was kind of his shtick. It really does feel like it translates. Yeah.
And it's been so helpful for me to be like, oh, my body, just even in relating it not to my dreams in my sleep, but in the psychedelic experience, it's like, oh, my body's still dreaming. Like it thinks it's like it's trying to do something. And so my process worker would help me. And same with my original integration coach that I went to, they would help me follow the processes of the body, like lean into whatever this is. And then it's like, oh, a thing starts to unfold and something starts to unwind and things start to make sense. And then I feel like more grounded rather than just trying to resist because I'm like, think I have some sort of disorder.
I'm very fascinated by that idea that leaning into the mystical, leaning into like more nebulous ideas about reality can actually ground you more sometimes. Because I think that's so true. Like I've really found that to be true as well. But it's a tough one to talk about. I'm sure there are people that are well versed in how to talk about it, but it always feels difficult knowing how to talk about it. For me, at least, on the internet. It's like so many things are just not universal, and like you make one statement and then there's like a million people who are like, well, this doesn't count, doesn't apply for this and this reason. It's like, yes. So it's like a tough one.
And mystical, it's like hard to know how to define that. It depends on how you're defining mystical, right? Because, working with your body, and if you look at your body as having like its own consciousness that's like trying to do a thing, that might feel mystical to some, but for me that feels very almost animalistic. Yeah. It feels very instinctual.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm actually just an animal who has instincts that are, my body's trying to do a thing to help me recalibrate. And I just have to learn how to follow that,
Yeah. I think just like on the spot, if I had to define mysticism in this video, no one's asked me to, but I think to me, it's like just leaning into the fact that we're a storytelling species, and also that we have all of these kind of archetypal stories and images and stuff in our psyches, whether or not we're that aware of it. Like fairy tales being a great example, or how Women Who Run with the Wolves is all about like these cultural stories that have been handed down for a reason, because they are leading women towards certain wise teachings and truths. But yeah, I feel like I can totally see why it's not always useful for someone with something like schizophrenia or whatever. I think there's an impulse when you're feeling untethered like that to cling to like the Western psychology approach, because it's like you feel crazy. And I like experienced that with psychedelics too. But actually, again, it's like sometimes like leaning in I feel like a lot of martial arts are all about, maybe there's just specific ones and I'm talking out my ass, but I think jujitsu a lot is about like leaning into I might be getting that wrong, but leaning into the attack rather than just like resisting and defending. It's like kind of harnessing the energy by leaning in so that you can then respond. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is this
No, it's making sense.
It's on the edge of my brain.
But. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And it's like doing that with an anchor, like you were saying, like me doing this with my practitioners, like my process work or whatever, so that I could be like, okay, I can lean into this and I'm not going to leave my body.
You feel safe. Yeah. Honestly, I think that's why, I wasn't naturally drawn to mysticism at all. If anything, I was like extremely resistant to it. But then I was reading Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And at first I was just like, okay, I wasn't sold. I can't remember why I was reading it. I think my uncle had recommended it. And my uncle is very sciencey, so I must have had some trust. But I think Eckhart Tolle gave me like the foundation I didn't even know I was going to need as I navigated a lot of things. Because he's just very good at getting you to be like, just because you have a thought or a story, like you just got to recognize like that's a thought, that's a story. It may or may not be true. There's a spectrum of how true it may be and in what context. And I think that was like, I really credit Eckhart Tolle with a lot.
Yeah.
But it sounds like your integration coach was kind of that for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, I think when you can hold the, like not take things so literally, and like you were saying, how we're like a storytelling species, and almost look at things symbolically and metaphorically and be open to the fact that like, it's like things are not literal, for me at least. That's like the better you're going to do in life. Like that's what gave me such a rigid psyche that just shattered, was the inability to be like, oh, there is mystery, or oh, there is, like everything is metaphor, everything is symbol.
Isn't it wild that like Mormonism, one of the most like obviously fake stories that could exist, but it's like so story driven, like the entire, it's Joseph Smith's little story that everyone's bought into, like the Book of Mormon, it's all a story, but I think there's like a unique way that it fucks you up when you're being given something that is so story based and being told that it's so literal. Like that really fucks up that quality of us, like the fact that we're a storytelling species. It fucks you up because it is like co-opting it in a way that is like so profoundly unhelpful. So then even when you leave, how are you supposed to navigate that?
I know. And it's like you have a hard time finding like a gauge for like consensus reality versus like, okay, what things should I take literally versus what things should I be more fluid about?
I think Women Who Run with the Wolves is a really good way for people to kind of get comfortable with using stories, archetypal images, whatever, in a grounded way. Like, you don't read women who run with the wolves and like go into psychosis, you know, like
Exactly.
it's got the sort of the perfect approach, I think, where even though she does speak very poetically, I'm just kind of throwing out a recommendation if anyone's curious, but
Yeah.
it's like a skeptic could read Women Who Run with the Wolves and be like, maybe it's a bit flowery and poetic, but could probably like get the vibe.
Mm-hmm. My view of mysticism when I was in Mormonism or when I first left was very sort of like, I just picture it like up here, like all the new agey people that are kind of like, you know, protect your aura with an energetic bubble and like put a shield of light around you and like, you know, the astral plane and you know how New Age is. And it's like entities and deities and ascended masters, you know? And so I'm like, this is mysticism, you know? And the more that like, and that's like one branch, you know, if that's what you're into, good for you. I love it.
Yeah, I feel like that's like more, we've had like different exposures to New Age. So when people say New Age, I mean, it can just really mean so many different things and almost nothing. Yeah. And then I talked to you and Kelly and I'm like, oh yeah, there's been like worlds that you guys have immersed yourself in that I'm like, like I didn't. You
didn't go down that path.
No, I mean, like if we're talking like entities and the astral, really.
And then for me, like I feel like the earth is mystical for me, you know? And so I'm like connecting to,
in the sense that it's this big interconnected system that we can never fully understand.
And that we're also a part of. And like when you really connect to it, it opens you up to like the mystery. It opens you up to, like, to me, it feels like a portal. Like you connect to the earth and all of a sudden you're just like, I am not a body, you know?
Portals, that's another big one I've realized in the New Age world. Like they be believing in portals in a very real way.
Always talking about portals.
Again, as we're having this conversation, I'm like, God, I got so lucky because I feel like when I think back on my psychedelic experiences, it's like they weren't always like one trip, one insight, but like I can think of like, okay, this was the trip where I had the realization, oh, I wasn't put on the earth. I'm part of the earth. I'm just as much a part of the earth as a mountain lion or the mountain itself. Like they were all like quite reasonable insights, if you know what I mean. Or I had one where while I was on the trip, it was just like, everyone is robots. But ultimately it was like free will wasn't real. We're all just conditioned with the product of our genetics and experiences. Like they were all quite like, those are quite like useful things to take out of a trip that was like, okay, that trip taught me that lesson. It's not like necessarily that crazy to have to integrate that. Like it is pretty wild navigating the world once you've sort of seen through the illusion of free will, but like, it's not the same as like doing frog poison and just having everything be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, what are they even guiding you to think about on those trips? Or is it they just kind of give you the medicine and leave you to it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I honestly, like my experiences were, one was like all about Jesus, of course, because I had just left Mormonism, but it was like fine. It was good, you know, and another one was like, I was grieving my divorce, you know, so it wasn't like anything insane. It was just the way that my body interpreted or reacted to whatever happened that I couldn't come back from.
I remember, because I wasn't necessarily like a feminist when I left Mormonism. I mean, I guess like none of us really were because obvious reasons, but I remember for a while I would have trips every now and then where I would be like on the trip being like, I'm having a feminist trip. But I couldn't even really like say what that meant because it wasn't like I was feeling like this crazy love for myself or anything like discernibly feminist, but it was just like there was this thing in my brain telling me like, this is a feminist trip. And then eventually it all like came out in the wash and, you know, I obviously have become like a radical feminist, but
I love it.
It wasn't always just like here's a perfectly packaged lesson to take from it.
Yeah, it's very true. It can be kind of like
you're feeling some weird connection to your period right now. Yeah. And it doesn't really mean anything, or it means something. It will all make itself clear in time.
Yeah, and then there might be like 5 years later that you figure that out. Yeah,
and it's going to be all these other influences, and who really knows where you end up? Like, you get lucky or you don't.
Yeah,
I like talking to you about this. I feel like I could just go in so many directions.
I feel like for me, like you have to, like the way I would describe that for myself is like an embodiment. Like you have to be embodied in your humanness and your like animal self. Otherwise you will float away like I did.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because like the word embodiment, I don't think I learned until like long after my healing. Like I was already, I mean, you're not like ever healed, but I'd already done like quite a significant amount of healing by the time I even encountered the concept of embodiment or like started thinking about my body that much. Like that was like a later piece for me, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking I wonder if a big piece of all of this is like you, while you were Mormon, was such a people pleaser, right? Mm-hmm. And you were very much like always outsourcing your decision making to others. And obviously as Mormons, we all outsourced our decision making to others. But like I grew up as an only child. I joined Mormonism of my own accord. I don't think, even though Mormonism did make me outsource my authority, I still think I did have a center of like, I'm at the helm here, you know? And even though in some ways psychedelics show you that you're not at the helm, but like, yeah, I do think that because you were raised in Mormonism, you probably just didn't get the chance to develop that. I was just like luckier in some ways because of that.
Yep.
So as I was navigating psychedelic experiences, it didn't necessarily feel like confusing. It felt like big and intense and like I didn't have a handle on it. But if anything, I think I'm like a person who's inclined to like think they have a handle on something when they, like I actually probably was way more confused than I could have articulated or known at the time. But in some ways that like served me well because it was always like there was kind of like a self-confidence in that or like a confidence in my own ability to think, even though I look back now and I'm like, you're such an idiot. But it's like, but there was some kind of like I was, because I had that self-trust is the way I would describe it now. It's so interesting reflecting back because at the time I wouldn't have I don't know.
Well, and I think, yeah, I mean, I think we're all idiots, you know, even up until the day we die. And so it's like, even though you might have been younger and not known a lot of things, or maybe you were confused or whatever, just the fact that you was, like you were saying, it's like you had already made big decisions for yourself in life. You weren't outsourcing stuff that I probably was. Yeah,
it's like there was a thread I was pulling at, and I was kind of comfortable with the fact that I was pulling at it, and I felt like I was the one pulling at it.
Yeah.
Whereas it feels like for you, especially because of the ways that practitioners like threw you into psychedelics, yeah, there was more of a like you being thrown. I mean, even just the fact that like the person is giving you the drug, someone else is deciding you're going to do 8 dots of frog poison, for example. Is it frog poison? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it was like 2 grams. Okay, I'm going to like Google what 2 grams of mushrooms is generally, you know, I'm going to ask Tana who's like I was still sort of in charge of the experience. And sometimes my friends would be doing a certain thing and I'd be like, I'm just going to do half of that because I could just tell that day, like I didn't want to do the amount that they were doing. So it was still like more self-led.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of have a bit of an issue sometimes with everyone's always like, if you're going to do psychedelics, like go to a good guide, go to a reputable source. And like, I do get that. And I think that makes sense for a lot of people. Like I know a lot of people doing ketamine these days. And like, I totally see the appeal of doing it in like a contained way. But I don't know, for me, it was like the self-led approach was like really useful and like suited to my personality.
Yeah.
So it's like I wasn't as inclined to seek out a practitioner because I didn't feel like I needed one.
For sure. That makes sense.
But it's like people are going to seek out practitioners, so they need to not be giving people 8 dots of frog poison.
Yeah, and I think too, what I've been more curious about is like, because I think we're trying to like go to all these lengths to be like, at least in the psychedelic therapy space, to be like, how can we like ensure a good experience? You know what I mean? Like, how can we make sure it doesn't, you got to do these things to make sure it's good, or these things are going to make it bad. And I feel like there's just too many variables to be like, to say like a universal thing.
And it's like something that, like it is also true, even though like your situation was of a certain flavor, like it's also true that some people can do a psychedelic trip, feel like it was kind of a bad experience because they didn't enjoy it, but then like the things that do emerge from it are ultimately good. Yeah, it's a very like, I've written about this a lot on my Substack lately through the lens of like monogamy versus polyamory, but like I feel like just we generally in the West, or maybe just humans generally, like we want to feel like there's this clearly defined ROI going into things. And the whole nature of psychedelics is that you really can't predict. Like there are just going to be presumably a percentage of people who, no matter what setting they do them in, it's just maybe not going to be good.
Yeah.
And that's why to me, I'm like such an advocate for like, just like start small if you're going to do psychedelics. Like that's one thing I generally would do a lot when I was doing psychedelics, which probably helped, was just like, I didn't feel the need to like go big or go home, you know? Yeah. It's like you can always do more, but it's kind of wild to me when people will be like, if you're going to do psychedelics, start with 2 grams. And it's just like, why? Why start with extremes like that?
I totally agree.
When you genuinely don't know how you might handle it.
Yeah. And to your point too, you know, it's like some people might have a bad experience regardless of if they have all the perfect setup.
Yeah.
There's other people who can have the absolute worst setting and their experience is wonderful, you know?
Yeah, like that's the thing. All the people that are very like pro-practitioner would say that my approach was like completely irresponsible, even though it's like, it's not like I was ever like driving a car or, you know, in like some crazy public place. But yeah, you just can't really say. Like everything I think it makes sense to have like general guidelines and to be like, you know, set and setting matters and all that. But it's like a human being taking psychedelics just has to accept a certain degree of risk.
Agreed.
And the fact that like, it's not like this, I mean, in the same way that when doctors prescribe antidepressants, they can't like guarantee that that's going to make you less depressed or not want to kill yourself. Mm-hmm. Like I tried Lexapro and it made me want to kill myself. Mm. So I think we need to just like have that same approach with psychedelics, but because they've been so stigmatized and like not part of our cultures, we're like so desperate to feel like there's a way that we can do them that is like really
like a guarantee.
clinically, like I'm all for clinical rigor, don't get me wrong, but yeah, we
Like a
just like want
guarantee.
guarantees that can't exist.
Yeah, and I think that there are definitely a lot of things you can do to reduce risk.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm more curious personally about like how do you put people back together after it's already happened? Because it's like even if like things are just gonna happen, you know, it's like they are happening. Some people are having wonderful experiences and some people are not. So what do we do for the people who, you know what I mean? Like they need to be put back together for whatever reason.
Do you think a big part of why your integration coach was helpful was also, I mean, I imagine you didn't have like a ton of people to talk about what you'd gone through with, and suddenly you've got this person who can actually hold that space with understanding. Mm-hmm. That alone had to have been.
Yeah, exactly. Like he knew the language.
Yeah.
He knew how to put words to things that I didn't know how to put words to.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, like even outside of any like specific, you know,
like
exercises he's having you do, it's just got to be so huge to have someone you can have reflect back to you like that.
Yes, it was helpful for sure. I was going to say, but I'm still fucked up. Just
You're
kidding.
still fucked up. The word regret is so weird, but it's like, is there anything you would change if you could?
Not necessarily because, and I feel like this is something I can only decide for myself. I kind of like hated it when I would go to like different people and they'd be like, the medicine only gives you what you need. I'd be like, bitch, shut up. You know, I'm like, if I want to decide that for myself, I will, but you can't decide that for me, you know? And I know people who have had really traumatic experiences with psychedelics who attach no meaning to their experience at all. And I'm like, that's
Could
totally...
never be me. It's valid.
Yeah, but it's like, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't need to attach some sort of divine purpose to your experience in order to heal.
Yeah.
You know? And so for me, I personally have come to a place where I'm like, this has been the worst thing in my entire life. And it's like given me so many issues that have been really hard to overcome, but it's forced me into a way of being that I never would have been forced into otherwise. So for me, I'm like, I don't regret it, but I don't think that means that they're, you know, people have to somehow find meaning in their experiences if they don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like generally useful to try and have a growth mindset with whatever you go through, just purely for your own like ability to survive. Like even if what you take from it is just like, that was something I regret doing and that really sucked. And I like believe in my ability to move forward. Like just finding some ability to take a lesson from it, even if the lesson is just like, that sucked. Sometimes things suck in life and I have to find ways to like move forward in a way that's good for me.
Right. That's like its own way of making meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. But people ask me that often, like if I regret doing it. And I'm like, I mean, one, it got me out of Mormonism, which...
I was going to say, it's just so wild because it's also tied up to the fact that you lost your entire worldview.
Yeah. Which I'm like, thank God. You know?
Yeah, thank God. But not necessarily normal.
No.
To do that. Normally it's like people deconstruct Mormonism or have at least started deconstructing it in a way that you hadn't even
No, it was
begun.
it was very sudden.
Yeah, so that's wild. Because I feel like as ex-Mormons, I mean, I've had the thought a lot over the years of like, oh, I wonder, if only you could just get Mormons to take psychedelics, like how many of them would deconstruct? But then it's like, maybe that wouldn't be such a good thing.
Yeah, and a lot of them do take mushrooms. There's a lot of Mormons who take mushrooms and like, or do ayahuasca and then somehow become more Mormon. They'll have like experiences with Joseph Smith on their trips.
And that just really shows the power of our storytelling
It's
psyches.
so true. It's
like,
so true.
They don't want to give that one up. That's the best one they got.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
In 2022, I did ayahuasca, just a full-blown ayahuasca retreat, which was good actually.
Brave.
It was it was wonderful. Of all my psychedelic experiences, that one was the easiest. Probably because I went to a really good facilitator.
Yeah. I guess I've been thinking of you as someone who just like doesn't really like psychedelics. They're not really for you. But then you saying, because I've never felt drawn to doing ayahuasca because I'm like, well, I've got so much out of doing the other ones that are easier. Mm-hmm. Seems like they are easier. Mm-hmm. That the thought of ayahuasca, I'm like, why bring that upon myself? Like, I don't feel like at this point there's anything I need from it that is worth plunging myself into that chaos. Because I mean 10 years ago and 7 years ago, whatever, it's like I was willing to deal with a high amount of chaos because there was nothing else for me. So it was like, why not? But now I'm like, why would I do that to myself?
Yeah. Ayahuasca for me it was easier for me. And I don't know if it's because then like when I did mushrooms or all those other things I was doing with the other people. And I don't know if it's because of the ayahuasca itself or if I literally just went to a place that they knew what they were doing and that made it easier. But mushrooms for me feel very like, this is the image. This is the like swirly in your brain. Maybe this was just my experience, but it just felt so like, I don't even know. Ayahuasca for me was more like, I felt like I was like being connected to the earth. And it's not that mushrooms didn't connect me to the earth. It's like, of course they do, but ayahuasca felt more embodied and grounded to me. And maybe it's just a better medicine for me personally, because I have a tendency to be so out of my body anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, there's got to just be like different drugs that are going to just vibe better with different people.
Exactly, for sure. That was the last one I did in 2022. And I did a very small, tiny bit of cannabis. I did cannabis therapy with somebody down here in Salt Lake. It was seriously like this much. It was teeny.
Did you hate it?
No, it was good. It was good. It gave me some insights into all of my other psychedelic trauma that I had about it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, weed definitely helped me get insights into my trauma. Yeah. Just like fast track. I just can't even fathom how I would have done all that work in therapy. I just don't think another human could have like led me. There's just no way.
And that's how I feel when I say the word therapy. I mean, I'm just referring to like the two people that I've worked with that have been so helpful. And they're exactly like what you're saying. All they do is know how to essentially kind of like be with you, or maybe ask the right questions to push you in your own process.
Yes.
That's like it.
That's what I'm passionate about.
People know what they need for themselves.
I completely agree. I feel like that's why my coaching practice slowed down, is because I'm just like, sounds like you can trust yourself a lot. And I'm just like so averse to people thinking they need other people's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to get like input. Like I like when someone gives me advice, for example, but I mean, as a coach, you're not necessarily giving advice in the way that you would with a friend, where you're like, you should do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I went to a lot of people where it was just like, I could tell that they learned some sort of modality and they just wanted to implement that modality onto me. And they're just like, okay, here's what you need to do. Here's what needs to happen. And I'm like, you are wrong.
I'm so averse to that.
Same.
I'm like, do not give me a framework. Or like, I want to find my own framework and then just use and discard it at will.
Exactly.
Although I do see, I mean, I know there's like benefits to like committing to a discipline, which I have failed to do, and that's probably like most of my issues in life are from a lack of discipline. I mean, you like say that you're so fucked up now, but say more about that, because you are someone who describes yourself as very fucked up, and obviously like I see you in like a friend setting and not like every day, but you seem well adjusted to me.
I mean,
outside of the fact that you won't have a decaf green tea.
Yeah, I'm really weird about food. This is new. I've developed 2 eating disorders since doing psychedelics.
Slay. Really niche ones as well.
Really niche ones.
Wait, what's the 2? Orthorexia.
One's orthorexia and the other one's called ARFID. They're basically just
I know about ARFID.
Yeah. So it's basically just like a fear of food.
Yeah.
And this is just since doing psychedelics. I think it was something about like ingesting something that did a thing that I wasn't expecting.
So you didn't have disordered eating at all before psychedelics?
0. Wow. None. That's been the hardest thing for me to undo. And honestly, like the reason why I say I'm so fucked up is because it really destroyed my nervous system. And when your nervous system just gets so destroyed and you don't have, like, I'm essentially having to rebuild a sense of stability based inside of me, and also rebuilding external stability with community and, external support. That takes so much time. And when your nervous system is so shot for so long, you develop so many health issues. Yeah. And that's just been my experience. It's like my gut's all fucked up. My sleeping's all fucked up. I just am like, I started having seizures, stress-induced seizures. Did I tell you about this?
Yeah, we briefly talked about that.
Yeah, so they're not like epileptic seizures, but they're like, it's essentially like too much stress built up in your nervous system, and you have like this, like if it feels
not a panic attack.
No, it's like, it feels almost like my brain is glitching. It's so hard to explain. Like, it's just like all of a sudden my brain's doing a really weird thing. And then my heart starts to palpitate and race a ton, and I start to get super nauseous, and I start to like get really sweaty, and it happens like very quickly.
I mean, that's similar to a panic attack, but that's interesting with like the...
Yeah, it feels different. It feels like all of a sudden there's a weird thing happening in my brain.
It's not quite the same thing, but every now and then I feel like my pattern seeking in my brain gets so intense, I feel like I'm going crazy. And I said that to Tat, and I said it on the Patreon, and then like 10 people who've been diagnosed with autism were like, that's autism. And I'm like, I don't know about that, but yeah. But it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm not sweating and nauseous.
Yeah.
But
yeah, mine will like stop me like in the middle of Walmart, and I'll have to like sit on the ground, and yeah, it's not pleasant. But I haven't had one of those for a very long time. It's been probably at least 8 or 9 months.
That's good.
Yeah. And then I just, I have my eating disorders.
Yeah, just if you don't mind me just asking you a question about that. Like that's kind of a good example. So let's say you've got this kind of generalized fear of food. How do you, and maybe you don't have the answer yet, but like, how do you work with that? Because like thinking of the whole, like generally I feel like with things we're afraid of, it's not good to like continuously follow do what the fear says to do, which in your case would be like, just like don't eat that, ever.
Right.
It's like, you don't want to just like fully give in to that, but it seems like you often feel like you have to, because it's like the consequences are so high if you...
Well, but at the same time, I can't. You can't avoid eating.
Yeah.
And I developed this really intense fear of like Western medicine, which has been very unfortunate. I'm like, I could really use a Xanax.
Oh, and you won't... Oh, yeah. I can't imagine you taking like an ibuprofen even.
I have just barely gotten back to the point where I can take ibuprofen, which is
That's
great.
good.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm proud of myself.
How did you get over that one?
Just a little bit at a time. Exposure therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
Exposure therapy.
I was wondering, so how have you figured out ways to work with the food thing?
It's honestly just that, exposure therapy. It's just a little bit at a time. And honestly, too, the thing that's been so helpful for me is, I know I keep saying this, but like getting reconnected to the earth, for some reason that has been life changing for me. And so it's like the more I come back into like, oh, I'm a body.
Yeah.
My body knows how to be a body. Like it knows how to do things. It's helped me to like get past some of these like very irrational phobias that I've developed.
That's why I find Taoist concepts very helpful, because it's like, even if it's a little bit of like, I think I can take it to a little bit of a woo-woo place sometimes, but it is quite helpful to just be like, I'm just being led along, and I can sort of trust the flow of life, including the flow of my own body, which is a part of the flow of life. Yeah.
Yep. It's almost like I became so hyper aware of what my body was doing because of like this experience with psychedelics and like losing control of my body. And then all of a sudden I was like super in my body, and I was like hyper fixated. And so it's like, I would eat things and I would feel probably things that I had felt my whole life. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, oh this is how my body is responding.
Yeah, like, do you ever notice that like you eat anything and you kind of feel a little bit sick?
Exactly.
As a grown up, even if you eat pretty healthy.
Yeah. Or for me, it's always like, I feel a little bit like maybe I get like phlegmy or something. You know what I mean? Just like things like that.
Oh, I have a compulsive swallowing thing lately that I find quite challenging to work with, because there's no way to turn it off. Like if I consciously try to stop doing it, that doesn't work. But also if I just try and do the thing of like, just let it go, swallow as much as you want, I will swallow as much as I want. And I don't, so I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? I can't just like keep swallowing forever. Like I'm developing like a jow. Anyway, this isn't about me.
Yeah. So what was the question? I mean, that does sound like something I would do, but I can't remember that one in
just
particular.
Like, well, I guess you've already said it. Like with food, you just like force yourself to eat something that you're a little bit afraid of eating, and yeah, I mean, honestly, but at this point, does that work? Because I feel like when you do that, knowing you're like, it goes badly. So how does that help?
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, I usually have to do it under my conditions in my, and I have to be like, and I sound like a total crazy person, but honestly, this is how it's been. Like, this is what...
No, I'm from an eating disorder family where I like lost my uncle to anorexia. So anything eating related, I've heard it all under the sun.
Okay.
Like, he was also bulimic, and the rhetoric that people with... I'm very familiar, I'm not saying this is you, but people with disordered eating, the rhetoric, it can be just so wild. Like the justifications my uncle would have for these like random things, but it makes it's completely logical to him and like was true for him. So it's like
I can totally relate to that.
It's a familiar landscape for me.
Yeah, and it's like I can feel there's one part of me that's like, this is insane, and then the other part of me is like, but it's not.
Yeah, but it's the only thing you can do.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, even from my own disordered eating history, I can kind of relate. So you feel like that's getting better though? Yeah,
a little bit at a time. I mean, if I had to have surgery or something and they had to like put me under, and I would be a fucking mess.
Well, they'd give you fentanyl, so that might help. You might wake up and be cured, because you'd when Jared
maybe
came out of surgery, he has never been so peaceful in his entire life. His entire demeanor was just not just like high and like loop. It's like, no, there was like a profound peace that I've never seen him have. And that's the power of fentanyl in a medical setting only. But yeah, I wonder if you never really know what might help something.
I know.
It's kind of so upsetting, because like one of the benefits of psychedelics ideally is like teaching people to surrender. But it's like you were thrown into so many intense situations that it kind of did the opposite, where now you're terrified to surrender, because it's like you were so profoundly disturbed by losing that amount of control that now you're like, I need control.
Yeah.
So it's like they kind of did the opposite of what they ideally would do.
Exactly. Yeah. People are always like, oh, I'm like, after I did psychedelics, I'm no longer afraid of death. And I'm like,
Oh, must be nice.
I'm like, I was never afraid of death before. And now I'm like way afraid of death.
I'm terrified.
I'm like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, death is one I go back and forth on.
Not me. I'm just scared.
Yeah, I'm scared, and then I have moments where I'm just like, it's gonna be fine. I'll definitely have like an everything rests in love death experience, and I'll get through it. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're taking ibuprofen again, because
Thank you.
it seems scary to not have that ability.
I
when you
know.
need it.
It's been real shitty. There's been a lot of sleepless nights because it's like I have like a headache or cramps or something, and I'm just like, well, I guess I'm gonna sit in this chair for 6 hours until the morning. You know, it's so dumb. I hate it. Don't do drugs, kids. Just kidding. I don't know. My experience is kind of like an outlier, but it's been surprising, like opening up about it, how many people are like, oh, this happened to me, or like, that's me too. And it's just like, wow, I don't ever hear anybody talk about this. So
do you have any like resources you would recommend to people? I know you and Kelly always talk about is it the Tao of Fully Feeling? Mm-hmm. And I haven't read it, but I'm just like on board with it based on everything I know about it.
Yeah.
Do you have any other sort of books
So
you recommend?
are you talking about for like psychedelic integration or just in general?
Anyone who sort of relates to your journey,
Yeah, I mean,
whether or not
I would look
psychedelics
into process work. If it's like you don't want a therapist per se and you want somebody who can help you
So
still.
sorry, what is process work again?
It's like the branch off of Jungian psychology where it's like the body is still dreaming even when it's awake. So your practitioner, if you work with a process worker, they know how to read the language of the unconscious through your body. But it's very interesting how she does it. The woman that I work with,
Like your actual physical.
it can be.
Like, for example, like your posture says so
It
much
can be
about
it can be your body language. It can be things that are happening in your external environment. It can be it can manifest in so many different ways, and it's like they know how to be like, oh, there's your unconscious. That's how it's showing up. That's how it's showing up, and then they can like guide you towards it and through it so that something can like come of it. It's very interesting.
Like I'm almost like a bit jealous imagining like another person being able to tell me something like that. I've just never really had like another person be able to give me those kinds of insights. They've always come from within, which I'm grateful for. But
And that's how it is with a process worker. Is like they're really just, they know how to recognize it and they know how to ask the right questions, and they don't really know what's going to come up. They just kind of you're the one, they like guide you through the process.
Okay.
But it's taken me, I mean, because I left Mormonism and I always was outsourcing my authority, I went to so many different people. I didn't know how to do anything by myself. And so I tried I bet you I tried like 75 different people.
wow,
That's not an exaggeration.
That's a ton.
Yeah. And I found 2 that were
Wow.
actually helpful out of all those.
What's an example of a question that a process worker might ask you?
It's very body based. So like, let's say that I would be, she's like, how are you feeling in your body? And it's just like, I feel like this weight of, I'm trying to think of a really like clear defined example. I don't know. So it's like you're in your body and you're like, let's say you're feeling some sort of weight, or you're feeling like I don't know, whatever it is. And then she would have me be that thing. She's like, okay, now I want you to be the weight. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm like pushing down and I'm like smothering you. And I'm like, and then she's like, okay. And like, and what is it saying? And then it's like, patriarchy, and then I'm like, it's the patriarchy, it's like stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. It's all kind of like parts. I feel like all good therapy is like kind of parts.
Yeah,
work
it's kind of
adjacent.
parts work. Yeah.
Or like Cindy, she was kind of had a revelation when she was in rehab where her therapist was like, draw your shame. Just basically finding a way to externalize
Yep.
a feeling.
That's
through,
very similar.
Yeah. Art or dance or anything really.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement involved in process work. Sometimes they'll do actual dream work. Sometimes they'll do art. I'm trying to think if I have any other resources. I mean, the Tao of Fully Feeling is really good too, obviously.
Have you read No Bad Parts?
I haven't, but I've had a lot of people recommend it.
See, I read it and it was like, I feel like I already like somehow had learned about parts work before reading the actual book, and then reading the actual book. I mean, it is good. I could see it being useful for people, and John DeLynn told me that this is maybe related to the fact that like this guy came up with parts work like while doing a PhD, and there's something about like to create a theory as a PhD student, there's certain like criteria it has to meet. So maybe this is related to why. Sorry, I didn't explain that well, but in there he was like, the guy was like, he's kind of like teaching you how to do parts work with yourself, but then he's like, but if there's any of these types of really intense parts, don't work with them alone. And I just like really balk every time I hear that. But do you think there's validity to that? I mean, there must be if you wrote it, but like,
I mean, personally,
do you feel like there's been parts of you where it's like you could not have like faced that part alone?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I just like it, like
I think
it just bothers me when I hear it, because I'm like, I can do it by myself.
Yeah.
And like maybe that's Maybe some people can, some people can't. Yeah. And it depends on the nature of the thing.
For sure.
Yeah, blah,
For
blah,
sure.
blah. I feel like we're like the exact opposite. You're like 75 teachers. I'm like
0.
I hate them. Like I don't.
I hate them all.
No, it's like I went to this Jungian therapist, right? And this was before I was into Carl Jung at all. Had like no, just wasn't on board really with the concept, but like she was an EMDR therapist. And I went to her a few times and she has me like pick out the little trinkets from around the room to like, you know, and I'm kind of rolling my eyes a little bit and like don't really love that I'm like so hyper aware of my own processes in picking out the things because it just feels like I'm performing in some way and I'm like a caricature of myself as I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So anyway, she ended up dumping me because I just didn't come to sessions enough after, so we never even got to the EMDR, but we did like 3 sessions. But I do remember she was, oh yeah, this is how I got introduced to parts work. She just like said something once about like parts, how we all contain like different parts. And I was just like, yeah, cool. Like that is like interesting and true. And then she didn't even really like do much that was Jungian with me except for like get me to pick out the little trinkets or, you know, I knew that was her thing. But for some reason, just the fact that I encountered her, even though she ditched me as a client and like we didn't really do much therapy together, just the fact that she like mentioned parts work and was a Jungian therapist, then like weirdly did lead me down that path because I just found like that parts concept helpful in my brain.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like any useful encounter I've had with a therapist is like a very brief brush and then I'll like take something with me. And then it's like books that have been my therapists. Yeah. Like I'll read a book and be like all in on that. And then like the author is like my therapist in a weird way.
Yeah.
But I've never had much luck with actual therapists. Like I had a therapist at BYU Idaho who introduced me to the concept of attachment theory, which at the time was like groundbreaking and sexy and new. And we only had a few sessions together, but just like the fact that he introduced me to that concept, I don't know.
Like furthers you on in your own process.
Mental health is just, yeah, it's just like so wild.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I went to 75 and I only found 2 that were actually helpful.
Yeah, I find that's like, that makes sense to me.
And I knew
like
what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I know a lot of shit.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody who's, I feel like is going to talk down to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I need somebody who can help me in my own process. And it just took a long time to find.
And to be clear, I'm not trying to sound grandiose. Like I'm sure if I saw 75 people, there'll be 2 good ones in there too. You know, I'm not trying to say that like I'm better than therapy. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But yeah, it's just like we're drawn to do. Like I desperately needed therapy at the start of my psychedelic journey, but you couldn't really have got me to do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
If I would have met the right therapist, you probably could have.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway,
I have to go.
Yeah. Sorry. that we got round it at the end, and it's just fun talking.
I feel like
about
we
all
could.
this.
Yeah, I feel like I could keep talking about it.
I know. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having
really
me.
Good. You're so wise, and I love all of the stuff you post on social media. And
Thank you.
You're a fun person to like watch your narratives about it all evolve because I feel like you're just like me, where you're constantly psychoanalyzing yourself, and that to me is like the most interesting thing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, go follow Stephanie if you don't already. And sorry about the camera quality in this video, but hopefully you enjoyed it in a podcast format.
Good day.
Okay, bye. Love you.
Bye.